there there are obviously some feelings of not everybody always agreeing with Israel, but there's this, very, very, very strong support. But I had never really gone way back into history, way back before even Israel was created. What was the American Jewish experience to Israel? What was just in general the American experience? So yeah, I just wanted to, think about him for a second, and that he really, inspired my journey, and I'm here today thanks to him. Obviously it's become more relevant than ever, this relationship, as we speak. So let us go ahead and start with the presentation. Let me go to slideshow. Let me pull up my notes to make sure I don't forget anything. Okay. So obviously the presentation is titled American Jews in Israel, Ensuring the Continuation of Our Strong Relationship. So obviously everything is super strong, but the goal for our community and for American Jews is to keep this relationship strong. So we're going to go a little bit back into time, see before the birth of Israel, all throughout the years, kind of leading up to the war today. How has the relationship changed a little bit? How does it go back and forth? What can we do to keep it strong? And in general, what do American Jews think of Israel? That is a big topic, but also, we have lots of hopefully younger people, and everyone too, but the younger generation. How is the younger generation feeling towards Israel? And what are those, feelings inspired, and what can we kind of do to bring more education? So with that, some guiding questions. Has Israel had the same relationship with American Jews since the establishment of Israel? What factors affect this relationship? And again, how does this younger generation feel about it? Are they less connected or more connected than ever? Or are they shut off with the war? And will this relationship continue, this strong relationship? How do we keep it strong? Okay, so those are our guiding questions. Feel free if there's I use a lot of lingo in the American Jewish world. If there's something that you don't know what I'm talking about, some organization or any kind of historical contextual event, feel free please to ask questions. I do want to hold your comments for the end, but yeah, thank you. Please ask questions. Okay, so we're gonna go back way before Israel even exists, right? When there is Zionism coming about, the idea of Zionism, the idea of having a Jewish state, of having Jewish sovereignty. So what do American Jews think of this? Do they, when they hear of, Theodor Herzl come to be with his idea, the Basel Conference, 1897, do they say, yes, absolutely, we're on board with this. We're also going to come to Israel. We're going to make Aliyah. No, that's obvious. That's not true. It kind of was seen as this mythical place. Jews who lived in at that point of time was the British Mandate of Palestine. They did see it as a mythical place, a place for Jewish others, those who were really religious and really wanted to go back to the Holy Land. So there were Jews living there, but there was never ever any kind of American Jewish movement to say, yes, we want to join the Zionism, European Zionism, European and Russian Zionism at that time. No, we don't really see that. For a lot of American Jews pre the birth of Israel, America is already the promised land. A lot of them had already fled to America through pogroms or anti-Semitism in Europe. So we don't see that before, there's already kind of this distance, and where this is kind of pre-globalization, where you can't just call someone in Israel. We're talking kind of we know it's there, we know it has some connection to us, but we're not necessarily on board with this. Even as that said, the U.S. is supportive of Zionism, and the United States was the first to support a partition for Israel in 1947, and Israel was recognized by the United States 11 minutes And there were a lot of questions when Israel came to be. Who would exactly back it? Where would it go? Which kind of would it go towards, more towards the Soviet Union, because there was a lot of socialist sentiments, or would the US kind of become its main relationship, or the UK, or where does it really go? And nobody really saw any strong relationship, to the point that actually France is the main relationship to Israel, and we're going to see that continuing in the 50s and most of the 60s. And right when you think of Israel today in this special relationship, you definitely don't think of France. And why? Like, right, this question, let's go to the next slide. Let's kind of look at these maps to have a better understanding of why France cares. Oh, I see. Okay. So if we're looking at these maps, obviously France had a lot of influence in the Middle East and in Northern Africa. And this is kind of by the 50s and the end of World War II, they lose a lot of their influence. But there is kind of this hope that, if they become allies with Israel and bring them a lot of arms, they will help with like Algerian rebels, and they'll help with Algerian intelligence. And this is like kind of this hope that France continues in the 50s. But still, we see a lot of brand new states that are being born: Lebanon, Syria, which was all French influence, to the point where actually US is still really distant from Israel. They are also building a nuclear weapon in Dimona, or obviously secret to the state, secret. The US is kind of trying its best to keep a policy of containment with the USSR. So the US does not really want to get involved with Israel, because if they do, we have no idea if like some kind of arms race. So I call this period really distance. And one of the main wars that Israel is involved in 1956 over the nationalization of the Suez Canal. This is when France and England come together to invade Egypt. Is actually the United States that tells them to get out of there, to not be involved with this war, and they come in with the UN, and it's kind of seen as this big embarrassment. Okay, so that's kind of the period of the 40s, 50s. Let's kind of go into the 60s. Or no, first I wanted to talk also about American Jews. So it's kind of very similar to this like geopolitical movement of America. After post 1945, their American Jews obviously know of Israel. They are proud of it, but they're still distant. They see it rather as a homeland for persecuted Jews and those running from anti-Semitism. Even with that said, a lot of philanthropic organizations are coming to be. The UJA, United Jewish Appeal, the American Jewish Committee, those organizations are starting to come together and donate a lot of money for Israel, but you definitely don't see any kind of crazy like aliyah, like you don't see, which means moving to Israel. You don't see American Jews saying, yes, we have to go join them. We have to go build Israel. We have to be part of this. This is our homeland. Israel is really not easy to travel to, and there's really not much known about Israel. Israel is really this brand new country starting on its own feet, so it's not part of the American Jewish central identity. And speaking of American Jews in general, they're also afraid. Like, they obviously see what happened in Europe, and they're not necessarily so brave yet. There's not a huge movement for lobbying yet. American Jews are more cosmopolitan. They have a lot of trauma of creating the Holocaust again, of bringing a lot of attention to themselves. So they're not necessarily coming and speaking a lot to the US government about Israel. It's rather something in the distance. There, in general, the 50s is a good point where Jews in America are building their own careers. They're coming to the suburbs. They're moving all across America. They're not necessarily as involved in Israel. So really, I call it humble beginnings, and both from the American perspective and the American Jewish perspective, a lot of distance. Something that's quite significant that changes the narrative is this book. I'm sure maybe some of you have read it, some of you have seen the movie. Love to hear any thoughts about this. My own grandmother told me she read this. Leon Uris, who writes Exodus in 1958. Leon Uris is an American Jew, he served in the U.S. Army, not in the Israeli army. So it was quite interesting that he went and did all these interviews to kind of bring the story of the birth of Israel. And it became a bestseller in the United States to the point where they made a movie of it in 1960 with starring Paul Newman. Ben-Gurion himself called it, the best thing ever written about Israel, like a great piece of propaganda. I had read Exodus, but I'd recently seen the movie. It's a long movie. It's 3 hours. It has everything. Like if you were looking for, the story of Israel and what a lot of things Israel stands for, it has it all. Right? It has the story of the Holocaust, the story of the new Jew, the new Hebraization, right? This guy, the main character, Ari Ben Canaan, the biblical experience, this moral right. Right? And American Jews read this and they really start to feel for Israel. It really changes their perspective. This idea of the new Jew, the strong warrior, the pioneer, the kibbutznik, the good versus evil, Arabs versus Jews, and they're doing the right thing. And this, I would say this is one of the most significant books written in the 20th century. What else I would say, considering this is COJECO, this is a huge piece of samizdat that comes to the Soviet Union and also brings a lot of Zionist sentiments to Soviet Jews. It was brought in secretly through Israel, through other channels, and given to Soviet Jews who would each have turns to read the book. And then they would give it to another person. And then slowly, this brought more Zionist sentiments. I don't know if anyone's curious to give me in the comments, have they seen the film or read the book? No? I mean, and again, like even the name itself, Exodus, right? Yes, Romans read it in Russian. Jania's read the book, Jennifer. Okay. So yeah, this is well known. I do like, it's interesting because I do think the younger generation is not as well known about. Okay, so let's move on from Exodus. This kind of brings us into what I call okay. I like that comment. So historians have kind of periodized this like American Jewish relationship to Israel in kind of 3 different periods, right? We have kind of distance. And then from the 67 war, we have love affair. And then we'll see later kind of disentanglement, kind of disenchantment. So this is the period after the 67 war. We see America start to come in, and then we see, especially less than America, we see American Jews come in, and it truly is a love affair. So as we know, 67 war is a huge attack on Israel by its neighbors, and Israel conquers a lot of land. You see in this map right here, and it's like considered like this crazy war because Israel is so small and conquers the Sinai Peninsula and the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights. And it's like, wow, how, right? American Jews are watching this and thinking, this is heroic. This is something biblical. This is something amazing. And the American government does have to swoop in because France says, you know what, we're no longer interested in you. We lost Algeria. We don't really care much anymore. We're going to go more towards the Arab sides. And at this point, we also see the Soviet Union come in, back up in Egypt, who has Nasser. And at this point, the United States says, if we don't swoop in, this could become a nuclear war, which we see a lot in the 60s. And if we don't swoop in, we might destroy Israel. And we can't do that. That's like morally wrong. And American Jews, they get like never before, and they actually come back to tribalism. They were in cosmopolitanism. Now they come back to kind of these sentiments. Okay, let me just give a few statistics. So $317 million were raised after 1967, which is, if someone wants to go to inflation calculator, that's a huge amount. And this is the first period we start to see aliyah towards Israel, both from the Soviet Union kind of Jews saying, let me out, I need to go there, I need to help build this country, and American Jews. They come there, they come to live on a kibbutz, they settle there. We have a huge march for Israel in 1967, 150,000. AIPAC, which is the American lobby, American Jewish lobby. Now they say just American lobby. They start to fight for Israel. Again, this is really like, we want to build this state. We look at this heroic survivor from Exodus. We want to create Israel's boom. At the same time, as you can see, Israel conquers a lot of land that is not necessarily a Jewish population. So the American government is also kind of coming in and saying, we have to be the ones who are going to do the peacemaking. We have to make sure if Israel's going to be strong, it's going to be our ally. We also have to make sure that it's going to do what we want it to do. Okay, so we're going to continue in this period that we call a love affair. So this continues. Some things that kind of help the love affair is the Holocaust. Comes a lot more knowledge about the Holocaust comes in the 60s. 1961, there's the trial of Adolf Eichmann, who was caught by the Mossad in Argentina, and they brought him back to Jerusalem. A lot of the horrors of the Holocaust come in the 60s. Jimmy Carter, a little bit later, he comes and he says, we'll create the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. He does that with Ali Wiesel, who is a Holocaust survivor of Auschwitz. Tikkun Olam starts to really come to mean Israel. Tikkun Olam meaning in Hebrew, like let's repair the world, a big part of Reform Judaism, especially, and especially Soviet Jews. Soviet Jews, they say, we want to go, let us go out to Israel. And American Jews really take that to heart and say, that's part of our mission. That's part of our, love affair. Israel is a victim, like this poor tiny country that survived these people survived the Holocaust, and look at the evil Soviet Union. We are very much in the Cold War at this point. Let my people go, and American Jews they're in it, right? They really feel this is like huge support. Speaking quickly about America, America along with the UN comes up with their Plan 242, Land for Peace, which continues to this day. And it's really part of the American government, not just part of the Soviet bloc, like to be there and be with Israel to keep the Soviets away, but also as part of their peacekeeping mission. Okay, any questions before we go into the kind of the 70s? Okay, so 70s were still part of what a lot of historians kind of called the love affair. In 1973, there's Golda Meir, Moshe Dayan. Once more, the same kind of outrage that we saw in 67 is seen in 1973. Just for a scale of what's going on today, this war was 19 days. A surprise attack on Israel. Israel really struggles financially, traumatically. Once more, it's this poor victim. It is in the David and Goliath story. It is the David once more. And as we see in these periods of 60s and 70s, there's almost nuclear war. American Jews are again coming together, raising a huge amount of money. They're lobbying, they're doing everything, saying, of course, America has to come in and help. Let's bring in some more statistics. The United Jewish Appeal raised $668 million. This is back in the 70s, in 1974, a 290% increase in 1 year. And this really does hit America hard in the 70s, right? There was a huge oil embargo in 1973. The United States really suffered by supporting Israel in the 70s, but in many ways, they still felt like this was morally the right thing to do. And again, if the Soviet Union was backing up the other Arab countries, the United States really felt like they had no choice but to back up Israel if there were all these hostile neighbors. So let's keep going. Part of our love affair is American peacemaking, and the United States is very successful with Jimmy Carter in 1978 at the Camp David Accords, when they're able to, make this deal with Egypt in our map seen here on the right. So in exchange for peace with Egypt, they give up the Sinai Peninsula. And that is the biggest peace deal right here, and 242. A very happy Jimmy Carter here. Okay. So we're kind of reaching the end of this period of the 70s and going into the 80s, but really this is when I would say this special relationship that continues today really become together. I call this myself, like, you can't live with them, you can't live them without them. America and Israel. So by 1974, something to this day, we see Israel becomes large recipient of U.S. aid. And as we just see in all these statistics, this is really, the glue that holds them together. And with the support, of course, of American Jews who are in this, I would say, like love affair, a memorandum of understanding. There, Israel's declared the major non-NATO ally, the free trade agreements. The 80s are also interesting because we see the rise of Ronald Reagan, who brings with him a lot of support of evangelicals. Evangelicals love Israel. They believe that Israel should exist because if Israel is there, then eventually the Mashiach will come, and they're also anti-Arab, so they support Ronald Reagan. And in exchange, Reagan has the support of American Jews who want to see this. And we see evangelicals. By 1989, the United States agrees to stockpile weapons for the U.S., which were used way later, when wars against Lebanon in 2006 and Hamas in 2014. So this is kind of, I would say, the end of what we see this love affair. Especially for Reagan, he sees Israel as this great ally in the Cold War. This is the fall. This is kind of the finale of, right, bring the Soviet Jews out. Okay. Now, this is kind of when I have a few slides of statistics. So this is just, I thought, really fascinating. This is from the Congressional Research Service of how much aid has increased. So the love affair has really become into this very much American special Israel relationship. These are really interesting statistics. Anybody interested in anything? So we see an overwhelmingly positive perception of Israel from evangelicals. Anyone say anything interesting? Okay.
Come on, Bonna, you know you can.
What was it?
Come on, Bonna. No, she doesn't want to. Sorry, she has more interesting things to say about this than I do.
Okay. All right. It's just very, very interesting statistics. Okay. So why I call this complexity starts. So when I was thinking about this, when you like fall in love with someone and everything they do is like amazing, like it's the best thing ever, like everything they do, you're so in love with them. And then kind of as the years go by and you say, oh wait, they're not everything they do I like, right? There's kind of that love entanglement. And this is kind of where it begins. And even the late 80s to 90s, Israel gets a lot stronger. This is when I would say American Jews, in some ways, especially the younger generation, start to question their loyalty, or question, I guess, their love affair. They start distancing. Israel becomes strong. It's no longer seen as the David and David Goliath, but rather the Goliath. There's no peace with the Palestinians in the Oslo Accords, right, which is the failed peace accords with Hillary Clinton. We see him. Intermarriage starts to become stronger between Jews. There's more of a move to reform Judaism, and the Soviet Union falls. So there's no more great cause of this glue of, pushing Jews to help Soviet Jews. And especially in the American public, the Lebanese civil war and the massacres in Shabra Shatila into villages brings a lot of huge crack for perception of Israel in the American public. So to keep going with this, there's this question that's not new, that I can think we can really see in our campuses across America. Is the new generation, are they distancing themselves from Israel? Do they not care? Or are they more connected than ever? So you can absolutely argue both. Dov Waxman, he is a scholar this is his field, American Jews in Israel. He argues that the youngest generation is more connected than ever to Israel. And just because they don't give, their undivided support, they don't support everything, doesn't mean they don't care. He said that they're actually way more interested than any other generation has ever been about Israel, but they are bringing in different perspectives. They are bringing more liberal perspectives. They have less exposure to the Holocaust. They have less exposure to anti-Semitism. there is more of a switch to being kind of universalist, they're tribalist. Just different generational memories, sorry. And they're much more likely to know the Palestinian perspective. And around this, right to this day, we see BDS begins, boycott, divest, sanction, justice for Palestine on campus, which we've seen recently, very active. This idea that Israel is an apartheid state. American Jews are, a lot of them are checking their Zionism and asking themselves, is conditional support fair? But at the same time, we're going to see some statistics. American Jews are way more connected than ever. They have way more opportunities to come to Israel. They have way more classes on it in universities. I myself went on a Masa program and taught English in Netanya. Yeah, everyone's heard of Birthright. That's something that was not, that's a very recent new program. So this is kind of in our cracks, kind of in between. Something not here, not there. Any questions? Anyone else? Who's been on Birthright? Just in our group. How many have been to Birthright? No, nobody wants to tell me if they've been on Birthright. Anyone on a Masa program? Okay. So let's look at these statistics. These are from 2020. These are from the Pew Research Center. As we see, 1/4 of U.S. Jews have lived in Israel or been there more than once. Anything surprise anyone in these statistics? The Orthodox is really high, 71%. So pretty high. These numbers, I would say, are pretty high, considering just how far and how expensive it is to get to Israel. Okay, another one very interesting. Among US, 57% say they follow the news about Israel at least somewhat closely. That's really high. That's more than the majority. Obviously, if we look, anyone have anything interesting? Anything they say? No? Anything stand out to anyone? If you look at the Republican, they're almost 70%. Same with the Orthodox, conservative, 75. Okay. So kind of this newest generation that we're really seeing today, right? The youngest generation. And I would say this about the youngest generation of Israelis too. They kind of grew up with a different Israel, right? The generation of intifadas, wars with Hamas, the rise of settlement, the rise of the failed peace prospect. Netanyahu, who's been in term 6 times, and most recently the judicial reforms and obviously the war that began on October 7th. So even if we say this, what we say what we see sometimes shame in American Jews or nuance, we also see distancing, apathy, but I would still say it's love. Right in 2014, we still saw an overwhelming support of Israel. And we do see like interest and care more than ever, but this does not mean, conditional support. That's something that is very different from the 60s and 70s. Okay. Some more statistics that I think are really fascinating from the Pew Research Center. Yeah, most US Jews are emotionally attached to Israel. And right, if we go back to before 1948, like these are crazy. We are way more attachment than we saw. Anything anyone sees interesting? Very quiet group today. Or please, yeah, feel free to share it right in the chat if you're shy.
Monica, wondering how Russian-speaking Jews fit into this, because it's hard to say where are we in this table, right?
Right.
Some would not, most would not identify themselves with one of the branches of Judaism, right? So not necessarily Orthodox, conservative, or Reform. Where are we in this table? And yeah, obviously, if you know.
I mean, I would say in general, like Russian speaking Jews are by far one of the highest supporters of Israel. I think if not by far one of the most conditional supporters to this day, right? Even if we see in these their feelings, I don't know, it's definitely hard to say in this table. I don't know, because what
Right.
anyone have any ideas?
There is also an age,
All
right,
right, there's an age
breakdown.
component,
Right.
right?
So,
If we
when it comes to Russian-speaking Jews, what would you say the age breakdown is? Younger Jews more interested in Israel, less, or it's again, we are consistent with the American Jewish community, and we are as connected and as caring and as consistent as American Jews.
I would say we're more connected, and we're definitely more supportive, even in that younger bracket, I would say. I mean, it's definitely huge if you say you do see a difference, right? From 65 plus 67% to 48%. I mean, and in general, I would say Russian speaking Jews are more likely to lean Republican rather than Democrat, like most American Jews. So they're definitely in that higher bracket.
Thank you.
Okay. So some more statistics, all from the Pew Research Center. Again, 8 and 10, that's really high. That's really, really high. 8 and 10 US Jews say caring about Israel is an important or essential part of what being Jewish means to them. I always think it's interesting that the conservative is higher than Orthodox. I think that is because part of the Orthodox branch, there is, a part that says that they don't accept, modern Israel. They're right, and until the Mashiach comes, there shouldn't be in Israel. So I do think that's what that 53 is. It's also interesting that women are a little bit higher than men. I don't know anyone else. I mean, this one I cut off the top a little bit, but it says most U.S. Jews are optimistic a way can be found for Israel independent Palestinian state to exist. So there is, right, we see a very high percentage of those who still want to see peace with the Palestinians, and I think that's like very, very much been the narrative since the 60s and 70s. There's just kind of been so many years that have gone by where we haven't seen it happen. And still, I would say it goes back to what Dov Waxman said, that they're more connected than ever. They care so much. Anyone have anything?
I think
Yeah.
none of us object peace with Palestinians. Right?
Yeah.
It's just whether we see the creation of the state as the solution. That's a whole different issue. But we don't mind peace. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, this one
As long
specifically
as the
says
other side is peaceful.
yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I heard someone else.
It'd be interesting to see statistics on how this breaks down by family.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, and then also like with the Jewish school system, which I went through in high school, how kind of that impacts things. Because I know I had a lot of classes. I had classes specifically focused on Israel. And for my final essay on my one for I had to graduate for senior year, I decided that my opinions were worthless and asked my conservative father to basically give me his so I could get a good grade and get through the class.
Interesting. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone see themselves fit into this? No? Okay. Or feel free to write it in the chat if you are shy. Okay. So yeah. Let's kind of go to today. Now, I definitely don't have any answers to today, but we're definitely seeing huge rise of anti-Semitism, huge rise of hate crimes, huge rise of terror across the world against Jews. Right, Israel's kind of shifted from these judicial reforms to really a fight of survival. There's kind of also a breakdown in the American Jewish world that so many new groups have been Jewish Voices for Peace who do not identify Zionist. A lot who are Zionists, but really are pushing towards peace, J Street, Israel Policy Forums. So this really brings us to today, and I have some statistics that I don't know, do we really stand divided when we have over 200,000 people who stood at the White House, including members of COJECO, on November 14th, 2023. There is still, very much that strength. We've shown very much that there's a strong relationship. Very much this can't live with them, can't live without them. At the same time, what's going on? Well, let's go back away from American Jews to back to America and Israel. We still see a very, very strong relationship with Biden and Israel. Right, they've been very much backing Israel's claim and not pushing for a ceasefire. And even if we've seen, the ends to call a special relationship to end the power of the lobby and to end the Jewish influence. And in some ways, there's even been questions like if if America kind of goes back against Netanyahu, does Netanyahu need the US? But they need each other. Absolutely. We need to continue this a strong relationship. And right, Israel's grown really strong, but thanks with America. And we hope to continue to see this strong relationship. Okay, so now this is where it gets really interesting. I'm not going to give these came out like last week. This is again the Pew Research Center. We're kind of stepping away from American Jews. I thought they were fascinating to share for those who just haven't seen them. And kind of to wrap up some general points. So nearly 2/3 of Americans say Hamas has a lot of responsibility for the war. So that's really good. That's really high. Anyone have anything they want to say about this? Okay. So again, these are really fresh, like last week came out. Now some other things. Americans are divided over how Biden is dealing with Israelis and Palestinians. And now this is like when it gets really interesting and kind of some final points that I would like to say that education is so important. Right, just how many say they don't know, they're not sure. By a modest more disapprove than approve of Biden's administration. So the most important thing that I took out of this and what the Pew Research Center said is that those who are more likely to read about what's going on and know the history of Israel and will approve of Biden's administration. That's not in this graph, but that's in their article. Anyone have anything interesting from these statistics? Here it is. And this is again where we may be seeing this generational divide. I cannot say that word, generational divide, and kind of help us explain what is going on these college campuses. And what I just said, older US adults are more likely to be following the news. Like very, very low percentage of age 18 to 29 is reading the news. Like almost 50% is not reading at all. Like that is quite crazy to me. Right, this is really where we kind of see this imbalance, and again, we are not talking about American Jews, we're talking about Americans, US adults in general. Anyone have anything that's interesting? Okay. And last one. Americans express concern about possible effects. So about 50% are worried about increasing violence against Jewish people in the United States. So almost about half are worried. So what these statistics really point to, and I think what point to not just American Jews, but in general Americans, is that there needs to be so much more education about this, so much more information about what is going on, more history about Israel, more history about the conflict. I don't know what else needs to be said. Some more updates that's showing that this relationship, even as we've seen things that causes the relationship kind of to fault, that things are very strong. JFNA, Jewish Federations of North America, has now reached over $1 billion for Israel, 711 million. and allocated over 242 million to Israel. But even as that said, like this is a really crucial time for the United States and for Jews. This is the Anti-Defamation League reports that the highest rise in anti-Semitic incidents. Let me pull up my my statistics. So this includes a 337% increase in anti-Semitism since the last year. This is 40 incidents of physical assault, 337 incidents of vandalism, 749 incidents of verbal or written harassment, and a whopping 905 rallies, which have included anti-Semitic rhetoric and expressions of support for terrorism against the state of Israel and or anti-Zionism. So pretty crazy. And just so you get a scope of what $1 billion is, in 2006, and I have already changed these numbers for inflation. So with inflation of 2023, $540 billion I said billion, $540 million were raised for the war in Lebanon in 2006, and $600 million was raised by the American Jewish public for the Second Intifada. So some of my own kind of conclusions, I would love to hear some of yours in the comments and the thoughts. We very much need for agency and safety. American Jews are feeling unsafe. It's very important that we, create our agency. We feel safe, and that we continue to support Israel. There is a generational divide. That is, something we cannot get rid of. We've seen the statistics. For me personally, I think there's really a crucial need for a better understanding of Zionism. Right, there's kind of been this bad connotation of Zionism, kind of away from what it originally denotes, what it originally means, which is that there should be a state for the Jewish people, that Jewish people should have sovereignty. Kind of, it's come to, I don't know, mean like this evil thing, this evil kind of taking over the world. That's been really personally hard for me to see. And to say something on a good note, like we've seen a lot of unity across Jewish groups with this. A lot of people come together, and all these different groups all at the March for Israel. So yeah, these are kind of the questions I've left the group with. I've been speaking for almost an hour, so I really love to hear some thoughts, how people are feeling. What is, how do you see Israel as part of your own identity? Anyone have certain experience about what Israel means to them? How you feel about it? What are some things you'd like to see? What can we do to help make sure there's still strong relationship? And how can we strengthen this generational divide? Okay. So thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Friends, you are welcome to unmute yourselves and ask questions or type the question in the chat. Monica, if you don't mind, I would love to ask. So you mentioned reform, right? Reform movement.
Yeah.
That the American Jewry is becoming more, moving more towards Reform Judaism. How do you think that's affecting the relationship with Israel? Is that necessarily a good thing, a bad thing? Is it increasing the connection or lowering the connection? And then the next question is the exposure to anti-Semitism. So the exposure to anti-Semitism was decreasing, and now all of a sudden there's this spike in anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic incidents. Not that, God forbid, we are advocating for anti-Semitic incidents, but do you think that this may result in a stronger connection amongst people who before that had very anecdotal or none of the exposure to anti-Semitism?
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of questions. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that people are moving to Reform Judaism. I think it rather correlates more towards intermarriage. People not necessarily, but people who are married to a non-Jewish partner are more likely to be in Reformed Judaism. So I think there's kind of that's kind of bringing the distance